Welcome to Agronomy Moment. I'm your host, Wendell Cohen. We bring in people who agree with me, disagree with me, and above all, are not afraid to say it like it is. Our goal here is to challenge what we think, understand the why behind agronomical advice, and most of all, eliminate the noise in the room that are distractions so we can focus on the information that is relevant to your situation. A moment called now. All living things need the here and now. Crops won't grow with rain next month, sunshine this fall, or the right nutrient applied next year. Decisions to protect the life of living things require us as parents, leaders, and farmers to make decisions for the moment and in the moment. This makes farming fast-paced with limited information to act upon. This podcast is about farmers making decisions in the moment for end results that last not only a month, a season, or year, but a lifetime. Ultimately, even your children's future. Your crop needs a decision in the moment. Your farm needs a decision in the moment. And that's where we come in. Come for the agronomy and stay for the fun. Let's make decisions that increase your potential. All right, everybody, welcome back here to our podcast. Scott is with us, as well as Selena, and we are going to dive right into fungicide apps.
Yep.
Fungicide?
See, wow, that's bigger.
There it is.
Yeah, fungicide application. So diving into different forms, ground, plane, and drone, specifically talking first about our small plot, which we only did ground and drone. So there's a cool aesthetically pleasing picture of our drone that does our applications. I just always like to look at this and look at the coverage that we get comparing the ground application to the drone application. Specifically here talking about corn first. Pictures out of Kentucky of the ear leaf and what the water sensitive paper looks like with the coverage that we're getting from both forms of application before actually diving into data. Because Wendell, if you're looking at that and you're thinking, all right, well I'm getting better coverage with that ground application in comparison to the drone application. Don't you think that translates to yield?
Yeah, I think it does.
Well, it translates to yield, but it doesn't translate to as much yield as the drone application. So looking at a 7 ounces of Veltima with the drone at 2 gallons compared to the ground at 20 gallons, you get a really good return on investment with that drone application.
So, explain that, why we think that is when the water coverage is clearly different.
Do you want me to explain it now, or would you like for me to explain it after I show the soybean results?
You just follow your own method and whatever you want to do.
Okay.
But I'm really curious.
Okay, I'll kind of cover
Yep.
that after I show some of the soybean data, because we did a very similar thing with the paper. So again,
Okay.
Water sensitive paper. This is in soybeans. So looking again, ground versus the drone. Similar story as far as better coverage. And very similar story as far as how we look at the return on investment and the yield. So I look at this and I'm thinking, this is specifically, these two are in small plot.
Okay.
And we have on-farm application as well.
Yes.
So when we look at that, we might start to see things even out a little bit more. But I think the reason why we're getting big advantage to the drone is because of that extreme downdraft that it presents to the canopy and how much disturbance we get in the canopy from that downdraft. Also thinking about the consistency that we have with the drone in comparison to, we'll kind of get into that, but with a plane or a helicopter,
sure,
you have that constantly staying at 10 feet above the canopy,
yes,
through the whole field. So couple of advantages there. And then also thinking about potentially having some coverage on the underneath side of leaves that we might not be taking into consideration. We have that huge disturbance in the canopy and leaves, a lot of leaf material moving. Maybe we're getting more coverage, and then also the higher concentration. So higher concentration on more leaves
And so you're saying coverage as in we're getting the underside of the leaf, we're getting up top sides of the leaves, we're getting more coverage from the drone, but not as together on a pattern on a
It
card.
would be like higher concentrations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So
That's our speculation.
Yeah.
It's 1 year.
But I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good speculation. I was just wondering what the theory was.
because it's consistent between both crops.
Yes.
yeah, and
And they were made at the same time. The treatments,
Yep.
they tried to time everything was made at the same time.
yeah, we always try to target on our fungicide applications in PFR. I believe it is before 11 o'clock. Those fungicide applications.
11 a.m.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I should have been more specific. But yes, before 11 a.m. because of that dew.
Well, sure. That is probably goes without saying. It's not 11 p.m. So
So that was the small plot. Now switching gears to the on-farm. And we always like to kind of joke around that we're not doing a green snap study with the ground rig. We are doing a fungicide application. So
Oh, what we have going on there?
boom, probably bowed down a bit.
I guess one of the things I should probably kind of hit on is a lot. We get a lot of the well, we can't get a ground rig over the top of our corn whenever we're putting a fungicide on. But looking at that water sensitive paper, we're trying to emulate what the coverage that a ground rig would have. So a lot of the purpose of
Sure.
why we're trying to emulate that coverage. So again, like we did with the small plot, doing the same thing again with the on-farm studies. And this on-farm study is done in on the Central Illinois farm. Wow, that's good formatting. So 2 years of the on-farm study, looking at the bringing in the plane and looking at the plane versus the ground. Again, the numbers really aren't showing up there. Maybe that's something
We can probably add back.
But just a slight edge there to the plane application over the ground. Then we bring in the drone. Very similar story of what we saw in a small plot. However, kind of like I said, we start to even out just a touch with bringing in all three forms of application there, and of course the drone being showing the advantage. But thinking about looking at all those applications, the fungicide pass paid, no matter how we got it on. Whether we got it on with the ground, whether we got it on with the plane, or whether we got it on with the drone, it made sense to make that fungicide application with the return on investment. Then talking a little bit about fungicide timing here in the next couple slides. Like I said, this is an aerial photo from a Central Illinois farm. And we kind of talked about earlier some of the stress mitigation things, and I'll dig into that a little bit, and the advantages of the stress mitigation as far as it comes to fungicide, and not thinking as much about the foliar disease pressure. But this is an aerial photo comparing the plane and the ground to the control. You really see those control strips with no fungicide sticking out here in a bad way, more or less.
Yep.
And then shifting gears a little bit to an ear leaf from the V10 to the R4. See, those leaves are pretty clean. Comparing that to the control and thinking about the benefits, like I said, this is said it earlier, location where we don't have a lot of disease pressure.
Yes.
And in general, across our PFR sites, we didn't have a lot of disease pressure, but specifically Central Illinois didn't have a lot of disease pressure there. But thinking about the benefits that a strobe can bring to,
Yes.
from a plant health perspective, reducing that ethylene production in the plant. So just getting that benefit from the fungicide from that perspective, plant health perspective, rather than looking at from a foliar disease
Yes.
standpoint. So I kind of started with fungicide timing, got a little bit distracted with talking about strobes, but
Yes.
anyways, 3-year multi-location, PFR proven at R1. So if we're going to make that fungicide pass, pays dividends to make sure we're making it at the right stage of the crop. So like I said, the ground, plane, drone, no matter how we got it on, let's get it on at R1.
This is one of our PFR proven success strategies for corn is application of fungicide timing at VTR1 being sweet spot.
So
it's very strongly favored in those timings.
So this kind of goes back to an age-old dilemma that I've always had with fungicides, is that we have to make the decision to do it whether not knowing what tomorrow holds. Herbicides or other things, we make decisions based upon, we know the weeds are going to come, we're going to apply it at a certain time, and we're going to keep our fields clean. Fungicides here, at R1, we might have a disease-free field, and it seems like we're just wasting spray. I'm just throwing this out as a point. This is when I walk a field and as a farmer and I'm looking at my field, I'm trying to make a decision. So help me understand just a little bit on, do you just take a gut feeling? Do you look at weather forecasts? How do we mitigate risk here?
Okay, well, can we go back to these pictures
Sure.
and talk about the benefits from with no foliar disease present, or
Yes.
little to no foliar disease present, and the benefits that we would get from a stress mitigation standpoint. So if you're going to pull the trigger and put the fungicide on, well, we might not get
Yes.
tar spot, we might not get southern rust, but we get a really good return even from the standpoint of a stress mitigation. You might have a different take on that,
Yes.
or more.
I think you can even spin it further than just what we see in the yield is harvestable yield. You know, you think of the overall plant health, stalk quality,
Yes.
stalk integrity, anything we can do to improve foliar health, whether that flip pictures. This is a picture, you see almost no disease lesions, but look at the difference in the health of the plants.
Yes.
That you can attribute primarily to stress mitigation.
Yes.
And I'd much rather have those leaves from the R1, R2, 3, and 4 treatments than maybe even the V10. The V10 looks decent.
Yes.
But think about the impact that could have on stalk quality by having a
Yes.
higher photosynthetic rate in those plants
Yes.
due to healthier leaves.
Yes. I think that's a good point. I just wanted to help understand that because it's really hard to say.
It'll be interesting to tie it back in when you get to the
And we're doing some different. So I'll talk about Xyway
Yep.
and what that kind of brings to the table. So this is looking at the 2-year multi-location data,
Yep.
and seeing there clearly that the reduced rate of Xyway, and then adding the Veltima at R1, has returned very well the past 2 years that we've done this study. And in comparison to the reduced rate of Xyway, then the Veltima alone, and then the full rate of Xyway. So we've seen in our testing that full rate of Xyway just quite hasn't been as good of return on investment as we see with that reduced rate.
Okay.
So our soils where we have more corn on corn acres, and our soils out east that are heavier clay content, cooler soils, deal with crown rots, seeing really good returns with the Xyway out there, and the support still staying with that reduced rate of Xyway with the Veltima.
Well, I think another thing, you think about the level of fusarium crown rot we can have around here and the potential impact Xyway has on that. We see significant improvement in crown health where we use Xyway, especially in the east. We have many fields here where we're not evaluating Xyway.
Yes.
In the creek bottom and heavy wet clays, we have gumbo.
It'd be very similar.
Xyway could be pretty impressive, I think, if a guy had the potential to put it on.
Well, and one point that I forgot to talk about, and I talk about it a little bit with the next, how we are doing some newer things in PFR with just different fungicides. But the fact of the matter is, maybe Xyway can give us a little bit more flexibility on our fungicide timing. So you brought up the question over, we're going to put it on at R1.
Sure.
Well, could it give us enough protection for our earlier season foliar diseases, for example, like gray leaf spot?
Yes.
To get us a little bit more flexibility to deal with our later season diseases like tar spot or down here southern rust.
Yes.
So if that's the case, maybe this makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
So, and if you're equipped with a 2x2x2 system,
and so you could put it on both sides of the corn row too. Yeah, that would be sufficient.
yes.
Okay. When they first came out, it was in furrow, and then we were told to keep it 3/4 of an inch away from the seeds.
Okay.
So that's why we've shifted to evaluating Xyway 2x2x2,
Mhm.
and we're still seeing benefits from it.
Perfect.
And like she said, the systemic activity of Xyway is pretty aggressive, clear up to the ear leaf ear. And so you think about gray leaf is probably one of our primary. That in northern, but gray down here especially probably is more common.
Agreed.
And it suppresses gray very well later into the season, which may allow us, like you said, to delay a foliar.
So the Xyway is kind of a new topic, but this year we tested a generic fungicide, and this is the first year in PFR where we are testing a generic. Historically in the past, we have tried to do 2 fungicide passes, whether that was a V5 and an R1 or a V10 and an R1. And with those premium fungicides, just really hard to get the return on investment we need to pay for those products. So bringing in the generic Strobe this year and testing that, looking at just different treatments, the Veltima at R1, and then the reduced rate of Xyway, like I was saying, the 2x2x2 with the Veltima treatment at R1, and then that generic at V5 and V10 with the Veltima at R1. And really good results this year from our first year of testing with that generic. And we talked a little bit earlier about the plant health benefits from a Strobe. And so continue to look at that and see, and kind of like I said, I guess whenever I get to sum it up, I'll kind of talk about that.
Back it up, I want to mention one thing there. When you look at putting a Strobe on it, say V5 or V10, in this case V10 performed really well. The stress mitigation effects. It also includes activities on some of the enzymes that help nitrogen availability, that the plants produce. So there's a lot of factors that a Strobe has, impacts that Strobes have on corn that can help improve their yield that isn't strictly disease related, and in some cases not even stress related.
Yes.
So I'd like to say we have a full understanding of everything going on. Hopefully we do, but the data is interesting, especially when we're using a cheaper Strobe as opposed to a full price product.
And then
next thing you get an ROI.
And so then if you look at it in that perspective, then is that there's more benefits than just future disease mitigation. I mean, that could be that's another one, but there's other things to factor in, which is good because fungicide, in my opinion, the call has to be made before you see it.
One thing you got to watch, though, especially down here, what we saw in Nebraska 2 years ago is where we applied a Strobe at that VTR1 time frame. We saw yield reductions, and we almost wonder in that case if we were keeping those plants from shutting down in their severe drought they had, and caused them to keep running to the point it was a detriment.
So that is probably the only thing that I'm going to mention out here is that if you think that you're going to have a year where the forecast, the outlook is hot and dry, and this is where the farmer's going to have to make his own choice. He's going to have to understand is if tomorrow looks like it's a disaster and I'm below crop insurance type of thing, the farmer has to make the choice and say, I'm going to do this or I'm not, because at a certain point, it doesn't really matter. But what we're really going for is when it matters.
And I think most of the time we see a benefit. It's a very extreme year where you don't.
Correct.
Maybe it's a year like this. Right. You got to make that call, just south here. Pretty rough.
Yeah. And I think for us, I don't think we've seen benefits. I don't know that for sure, but it doesn't look like the guys that did test it see benefits.
Because you were right on that edge.
We were.
It's pretty rough.
Yes. But I wouldn't want to manage my farm like 2023.
Right. Hopefully we
called for like 23 planned for. Yes, exactly.
So we also tested Xyway. It is labeled for use in soybeans. So we tested that for this year, the first year, with a dual dribble system. So the full rate of Xyway, and then an 8-ounce application of Revitec at R3, and we get a yield boost out of just the Xyway alone and out of the Revitec alone. Looking at that, I don't know if I have that broken. Yeah, have it broken out a little bit with all of the treatments across the locations. And seeing that the Revitec, the foliar treatment, the foliar fungicide treatment at R3 is returning very consistently and doing a lot of that heavy lifting, comparing it to the other treatments. And it was just always a good year to apply fungicide in Kentucky.
Yeah, right.
High disease pressure. I forgot I kept this. So we tested carrier rate and pressure. Do you want to cover this?
Go ahead. I mean, I can. I've been covering it. Go ahead. Go ahead. All right.
Oh. Go.
Am I going to have to make the call here?
Some of the questions we've had, this may kind of counter some of what we showed with the drone and aircraft, the aircraft application versus drone and ground, where we showed less coverage on the paper was resulting in higher ROIs. But so this may counter that. I think the key, though, with the drone, like she mentioned earlier, is in our studies, when we are calibrating the path of the drone, we'd fly over part of our plot, and the downdraft from the drone was enough to knock the dew off the plants, and it was causing an issue with our studies. So we would make our pass, and then we'd have to move over to start the actual treatment studies. So that drone really disturbs the crop a lot. Mm-hmm. So when I talk about this part of the study, what we're looking at is, carrier rate, but then on top of carrier rate, we're looking at pressure. And then as you can see in this study, when we had 15 gallon to the acre and 70 PSI, that's when we saw our by far greatest return on investment to putting on Lucento at 5 ounces and the soybean steady, which would have been at R3. So again, it's about gallonage, which counters what we're talking about with a drone at 2 gallon. You know, here we're looking at 15 being the best, but whatever we can do to maximize coverage of those plants. And that is a multifaceted discussion, because you got pressure, you have volume, but you also, to me, have to consider crop disturbance. And, you know, when we think about a lot of farms we spray here in Missouri, it's tough to get great crop disturbance from an airplane in all cases. Now, parts of the field you might, and other parts you don't.
Yes.
With a drone, you know, you're pretty well at fixed, I think, roughly 10 feet above the crop canopy. And so, you know, are we going to be able to go out there and spray every acre with a drone at 2 gallon the acre and get everything done? No way. But I think in most cases, anything we can do to enhance coverage. So if you're using ground rig, higher gallons, higher pressure is a great thing.
Yep.
The other thing to consider is, I don't care how you do it. If you feel you need to put a fungicide on, making sure that you get it on at the timely application timeframes, which is R3 for soybean and VTR1 for corn. I don't care how it's applied. You'll see the benefit from the treatment.
And if you can, pay the extra $1 or $2 to get the little extra water for your plane, or you can go with the sprayer. Put more gallons in it.
Yep. Make an extra trip with the nurse tank and let her go.
The neat thing is, when we do have to reduce gallons because it's aircraft, we're still getting really good responses with even that, because of the disturbance of the crop canopy. Am I correct?
Just having the fungicide out there.
That's right.
And it's key.
Yeah. But I mean, don't think just because it's aircraft that it's not worth it.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so taking the next step with fungicide, kind of summing up everything. Scott just hit on it. R3 on beans, R1 on corn, and we've talked about maybe we need to be a little bit flexible with our timing of infection.
Yep.
We brought up that question,
especially with tar spot.
Tar spot.
We may need to go out to R3, even R4. We've seen
Southern
benefits
rust.
in bad. Yes. So, but most of our key diseases, R3 is sweet spot.
Yep.
Yes.
And then plane versus the ground versus the drone results are a little bit mixed for 2 years.
I was realizing I made a mistake. It should have been VTR1 for corn. I said R3, but
I was just getting ready to circle back on that. I was like, he said R3, but only if that's only if you need to come back and check still.
Yes, VTR1's the sweet spot for most of our corn diseases. I screwed that up. So then I threw the pin.
He was so mad he threw the pin.
Yeah, he threw it through the pin. And now anyway, I was just thinking you need to come up with a jingle for that, like R1 on corn and R3 on beans. You can kind of get a rhythm and just memorize that one.
I'll leave that up to you.
Okay, whatever. Just memorize that one. R1 for corn, R3 for beans. All right.
So, anyways, our applications a little bit mixed results there. However, for the second year in a row with our on-farm trials, we do see a benefit to that drone application. Then the Xyway on corn, best in our corn after corn acres, and our acres where we have a higher clay content and more prone to crown rots. And then Scott just finished up with the higher carrier rate and higher pressure was consistently better on our soybeans. That was our first year of testing. I would say that that's not a big shocker as what we saw, but continue to look at that and test it out.
Very good. So I do have a couple questions. First of all, I want to talk a little more on that carrier rate and that higher pressure piece. It looked to me like in the data that we were able to get up to a 3.0, there we go, bushel return by having 5 gallons but putting it to 70 psi. Mm-hmm. Then we dropped down, we have 15, we have 70 psi, and we're at 3.7. We're actually able to overcome low pressures with
low gallons
with high pressure.
I think the droplet size and you're more misting.
But but I'm struggling with that a little bit because I'm not wanting to suggest, okay, we can go with 10 gallons on fungicide and just crank our pressure to 100 psi.
Our PFR proven success.
Also going to depend what kind of nozzles are on the sprayer.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because we didn't include that, but we have some nozzle information in PFR.
Real quick,
4-way nozzle.
Which nozzle?
You had that in your slide.
It's the 4-way green leaf.
Green leaf.
There's one that sprays front and back and side to side.
Yes. Yeah. Now, one does all 4, or you set it up in a pattern to get it to do all 4? One body goes 4 ways.
Yes. Okay. Multi-directional.
Yep. Front to back and side to side.
Can I use that for Liberty too?
Oh yeah.
Nice. All right. We might pop a picture up. I'll find one somewhere. We'll throw it up here on the screen so you can see it.
The key would be to follow your droplet size recommendations by the label.
Yes, but
I just want to know.
Details.
That's details.
Important details.
Important details, and we don't want to lead anyone astray. But what's interesting in here is you get that 4-way coverage. You're spraying. You're getting the crop canopy to move around different directions, but
Yeah,
hitting
because
four different ways.
it's progressing through. Yeah, one spraying this way, one spraying back, and then 2 spraying like that.
Yes, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I hadn't seen those until this year.
Yeah, that is neat.
We compared that nozzle to a twin
Twin
turbo.
Yeah, and
then a regular XR flat fan.
mhm.
Yep.
And in our ROI numbers, the 4-way and the flat fan, standard flat fan, outperformed the twin jet, right?
Mhm. I
Okay.
think so.
Based on nozzle costs and things like that.
And I'll just say my own perspective is I love the Greenleaf products. I think they've got make some really neat stuff when it comes to, if a guy likes to dive into sprayer tips and all the options they offer, they've got some cool stuff.
You can spend days studying nozzles.
Okay. And please don't get us started. We want to wrap this one up because we've spent long enough.
It's lunchtime too.
And it's lunch for Scott. We gotta go feed Scott. So we want to wrap up here today. We thank Scott for coming and joining us and putting up with all of our Cracker Jack and whatever we got going on.
Study to the
And throw everything. So thank you guys. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one. If you want alerts on what we are finding in the field, go to topagservices.com/signups to receive alert, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is our goal to bring you the most recent and advanced information possible. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We also ask you that you give us a like or follow our channel wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch these videos. This ultimately helps us reach more people like you.
Hello?
Hey, this has been Wendell Cohen, your show host. Thank you to all who made this show possible. This show is over. See ya.